The film begins by showing a husband and wife who are on their way to some place. The pregnant wife, named Rachel, and her husband, Matt, appear to be enjoying a smooth and pleasant journey, until they discover that the road ahead has been closed. Matt follows the directions for diverted traffic, but he fails to focus on the road and hits a fallen tree in the middle of the path. As a result, their car is damaged, leaving them stranded at the outskirts of the forest, far from any crowds. When Matt tries to contact a tow truck, his cell phone receives absolutely no signal. Luckily, he spots a farm about half a mile away from where they are. They decide to walk toward the house. Along the way, they come across a signboard stating that they cannot enter the area because it is privately owned land. However, they have no other choice but to continue forward. As they step into the farm area, they are suddenly approached by a car driven by a man. The man scolds them and demands that they leave. Even though Matt explains their predicament, the man refuses to let them stay and insists they leave his property. However, once he finds out that Rachel is heavily pregnant, and that the child is a boy, he changes dramatically, becoming very welcoming to them. This man's name is Bobby, and he informs his wife, Agnes, that they have visitors. At first, Agnes refuses to invite them into their home. But after Bobby tells her that Rachel is pregnant and the baby is a boy, Agnes becomes excited and tells Bobby to bring them inside. Matt and Rachel explain that they only want to borrow his cell phone and do not wish to trouble him. However, Bobby is delighted to invite them up to his house, explaining that the storm has damaged the telephone line and that they are waiting for a technician to repair it. They then accept Bobby's invitation and are taken by him to his house. On their way, Rachel notices a girl in a black dress staring at her. When they arrive at Bobby's house, they are greeted by Agnes and her two sons, Luke and David. Agnes asks her sons to pick up their guests' bags before leading Matt and Rachel to their room, where they will sleep for the night. They are pleasantly surprised by the hospitality, as their only intention was to borrow a cell phone. However, they are unaware that Agnes is listening to their conversation from outside the room. Suddenly, Rachel is shocked to see the girl she had spotted earlier along their journey. When she tells Matt, he doesn't see anyone there. Later, Matt and Rachel are invited to have dinner with Agnes and her family. While dining, Rachel notices a photo of Agnes and Bobby with the same girl she had seen before. Curious, she asks about her. Agnes reveals that the girl is her youngest child, Faith, though she is not present for dinner that evening. In fact, Agnes had adopted Faith, as well as Luke and David, since she and Bobby had never been blessed with children. According to Agnes, God has a greater plan for their family. Suddenly, Bobby becomes enraged with his son, startling Matt and Rachel. After dinner, Matt and Rachel return to their room, and Rachel begins to grow suspicious of Agnes's family. She hasn't seen Faith, and combined with their unsettling behavior, something feels off. Rachel tells Matt they should leave first thing in the morning. However, they suddenly sense someone listening to their conversation from outside the room. Yet, when Matt checks, no one is there. Noticing Rachel is exhausted, Matt helps her to sleep. The following morning, Rachel wakes up to the sound of crying. When she turns around, Matt is gone, and she sees Faith weeping over her two dead parents. Faith approaches Rachel and begins to introduce herself. Suddenly, Rachel jolts awake. It was just a dream. She now realizes the girl's real name is Ellie Adams. She explains to Matt that Faith is actually Ellie Adams, whose entire family had gone missing, and the case had been all over the news for months. Rachel suspects Agnes's family is involved and responsible for Ellie's parents' deaths. Determined to leave immediately, Rachel urges Matt to get out of the house right away. As they slowly descend the stairs, they discover that the front door is locked. Matt reaches for the key inside the key box, but it slips and falls to the floor. At that moment, Bobby appears behind them. Matt tells him that he and Rachel will continue their journey on foot. However, Bobby remains silent, simply staring at them. Just as they attempt to leave the house, they realize Luke and David are already waiting outside, armed with weapons. Without warning, David strikes Matt, while Bobby hits Rachel, causing them both to pass out. When Rachel regains consciousness, she finds herself chained. Panicked, she asks where Matt is. Agnes calmly tells her that Matt is in a much better place now. Meanwhile, Luke and David dig a hole in the ground to bury Matt. They strip him of all his clothes, including his underwear. As Luke prepares to end Matt's life, David suddenly suggests burying him alive instead. Luke tosses Matt's cigarettes and lighter are placed in his coffin, as someone remarks that he might need them when he wakes up. Meanwhile, Rachel is in the process of giving birth to her child, assisted by Agnes. Shortly after, the baby is born, but instead of the expected boy, it turns out to be a girl. Agnes takes the newborn outside, leaving an exhausted Rachel behind. Rachel, determined to escape, struggles to free her tied hands. When she finally succeeds, she picks up the hanging cross and pretends to be normal when Agnes speaks to her. However, Rachel, fed up with everything, strikes Agnes. Unfortunately, she is overpowered when the others appear. Once again, Rachel is restrained, with cable ties securing her wrists and ankles. At this moment, Agnes confesses that she killed Faith's parents in the name of God. She claims that she saved her adopted children from Satan's grasp, insisting that Rachel and other parents have been corrupted by evil culture. Rachel is then gagged and taken to a hay shed. Her breast milk is forcibly pumped by Agnes. Meanwhile, Matt wakes up, using his lighter to illuminate his surroundings. Disoriented, he looks around, trying to figure out where he is. He checks the loose side of the crate and finds dirt outside. At this point, Matt realizes that he has been buried alive in a coffin. Panicking, he desperately tries to break through the crate to free himself. After an intense struggle, he finally emerges, completely naked. Wandering aimlessly in search of help, he finds no one and remains unaware of his location. Before long, he stumbles upon a waterfall, where he washes himself. Nearby, he finds a cloth and uses it to cover himself. Back at the hay shed, Rachel once again attempts to free herself from her restraints, but her efforts are futile. Eventually, exhaustion takes over, and she falls asleep. Someone arrives, bringing her food and drink. It turns out to be Faith, previously known as Ellie Adams. Rachel pleads with Ellie to help her find something to free herself, but Ellie simply walks away, leaving Rachel behind. The scene shifts to Matt, who continues his desperate search for a highway. After much effort, he finally encounters two men who are camping. He asks for their help and explains everything that has happened to him and Rachel. However, upon seeing Matt's disheveled state, the men assume he is drunk and hallucinating. With no other option, Matt engages the two men in a fight. He takes their clothes and offers a win-win solution. If they show him the way to the highway, he will give them a knife to untie themselves. Meanwhile, Luke and David visit Agnes in Rachel's baby room. Aware that Agnes had been hoping for a boy, they propose a disturbing solution. Luke and David will impregnate Rachel, ensuring she gives birth to a son, which they believe is God's plan. Agnes, upon hearing this, is furious and chases them out of the room. Luke and David, who have never experienced such a thing before, finally decide to meet Rachel in the hay shed. As soon as Matt is able to return to the house, he is helped by Ellie to find Rachel's whereabouts. At the same time, Luke and David try to force Rachel into doing what they want. Luckily, Matt arrives at the right time with a pipe and beats them both to death. Rachel is relieved to see that Matt is still alive. She informs him that their child has been born and that the child is a girl. Matt is happy about this, and he uses his pipe to break Rachel's iron chains. Agnes, on the other hand, hears a knock from Matt's iron pipe, and Bobby checks it out immediately. We can see that Ellie is trying to attract Agnes' attention. When Rachel and Matt want to get out of the hay shed, they find that Bobby is already outside holding his gun. Matt immediately covers Rachel and lets himself be shot. Bobby then hits Rachel with his rifle, causing her to pass out. After that, Rachel is again tied up in the same place. When Rachel regains consciousness, she sees Ellie attempting to free herself from the chains. She notices that Ellie has also been chained up along with her. While at home, Bobby sees Agnes applying makeup to Luke and David. Agnes, who thinks that Luke and David are still alive, is advised by Bobby to let them go. They eventually bury Luke and David in the meadow, where there are 3 tomb crosses. After mourning their deaths, Bobby tells Agnes to go home, but Agnes, who still can't let them go, tells Bobby to go home first. Meanwhile, Ellie and Rachel finally manage to dismantle the bricks that are connected to the chains. They let go of the chains around their necks and hands before going to Bobby and Agnes' house to pick up Rachel's baby. After finding her room, Rachel appears to be pleased to see her newborn. But not long after, Bobby returns home. Rachel and Ellie have no other choice but to hide in the closet. After Bobby checks the baby's condition, he goes out of the room and brings the breast pump with him. But when he arrives at the hay shed, he finds out that Rachel is no longer there, so he immediately grabs his gun and goes back into the house. However, this time Rachel doesn't want to hide anymore. She asks to be allowed to give breast milk directly to the baby without pumping. Bobby agrees to her request, but it turns out that Rachel is only holding a cloth. She quickly stabs Bobby to death with a knife. After that, Rachel rushes to get Bobby's cell phone and calls the police. Unfortunately, Agnes arrives home at the same time, and she grows suspicious when she notices that the key to the hay shed is still in the lock. She then takes the gun and waits for Rachel outside. Not long after, she leaves with the tractor to go somewhere. Meanwhile, Rachel and Ellie slowly come out of the house with Bobby's gun. They rush to the car but are unable to find the car keys. It turns out that Agnes is monitoring them from afar. Agnes finally walks over to Rachel, forcing her to get out of the car with her gun, leaving Ellie with her child for a while. At this point, Rachel and Agnes engage in a firefight, but most of their shots miss. Rachel, who has been shot in the arms and legs, tries to prevent Agnes from taking her baby. In the end, Rachel manages to defeat Agnes by repeatedly hitting her head on the ground. Rachel and Ellie then leave the house, followed by the arrival of the police and ambulance. The police and doctor try to ask about what has happened to them. But Agnes, who is still alive, comes from behind the ambulance and tries to shoot Rachel. Fortunately, the police are alerted to her presence and quickly shoot her to death. The police officer inquires about Ellie Adams, who was previously reported by Rachel. At this moment, Ellie has just disappeared from there. Before the film ends, Rachel eventually realizes that the girl she had seen in that house earlier was not the real Ellie Adams. It turns out that her efforts to escape from the house were only accompanied by the shadow of the dead Ellie. Furthermore, one of the 3 tomb crosses in the previous scene is for Ellie Adams, who goes by the name of Faith Fairbairn. After that, Rachel and her baby are taken by ambulance to a nearby hospital. And with that, the film ends.